I'm going back now to the year, to that famous day, March 29, 1949, the day the train left Brussels to go to Marseille with the Youth Aliyah, the 200 young people who were on that train and where we were heading to an unknown future, to a new state, the state of Israel. And on that train, there was a young girl my age. In fact, I'm 2 months older. There was this young girl, her name is Edith, and she was from Antwerp. Now, originally she was also from Antwerp. We met on the train. I had not known her from my Jewish organization because they had added about 25 young kids from Antwerp who had taken the train to Brussels, and from Brussels we all departed together to Marseille. So I had never met her before. She and I became friends about a year later in Israel, really good friends. And it is now 24 years later, and we still are friends. Our lives have been very similar, very parallel from the moment we had met. We both spent each 2 years in the army in Israel at one time. We each returned to Belgium 5 years after living in Israel at one time. At that time, I mean. We eventually came to this country. We're just a few months apart. We each married American men. She has 2 sons, I have 3 sons. Our lives have been extremely, extremely parallel. And many times she will come up in my life as I'm telling it, because it's very strange, but to know someone for 24 years is a hell of a long time. And to have such parallel lives, needless to say, we each had an influence on one another also. I remember the first time I saw her on the train, she didn't impress me at all. It was only a year later that we became friends. She was very chubby. Actually, she was fat. And she had 2 long tresses, the détresse. She looked like a little peasant girl, and not sophisticated at all. And in comparison, we're the same height, exactly, but I felt taller. I was slim. I felt so much more sophisticated than now, so much more worldly already. And this was the very first impression I had gotten of her, is of a little peasant, little thing who, she didn't impress me at all. I have to repeat that because later on she developed so beautifully into a beautiful, slim, young woman. And Israel, the climate maybe, was good for her because she lost weight and she cut her hair. And anyway, she eventually became very, very pretty and attractive, and of course sophisticated. That's one of my favorite words. But anyway, this was the initial impression. So I do remember her very vividly, only because I found her so fat, and I just couldn't help it. But of all of us, of all the 200 or so kids, she just was unbelievably heavy and strange looking. I once asked her what her impression of me was, if she remembers me at all at the beginning, the first few months that we spent so much time together, since we spent about 3 weeks in Marseille, and then we were in the same what do you call that, Mabara. It's a place that when one arrives there, you placed in a Mabara. It reminded me a lot of the two transit camps I spent in France during the war. Very similar. And anyway, we did spend all that time together, and I asked her once, what impression did I make on her? It's much later that I told her how I thought she was disgusting looking, fat and short, and those tresses, she looked like a peasant. And her answer was that I impressed her as being very attractive and tall. We're the same height, that's what's so funny. And that she never dreamt that one day we'd become friends. She could feel, she was extremely insecure in herself as far as looks go, so that she saw that there was no chance we would ever be friends. We didn't have enough in common, certainly not looks-wise. And she has two sisters. She's the middle one. Her older sister is only about 2 years old, a beautiful, stunning girl. The younger one was adorable, beautiful. So, of course, Edith had a lot of hangs up and insecurity insofar as looks go. And only about a year or two later, she developed into such beautiful-looking person, and she never thought of herself as such. And today, she's even more beautiful than ever, and very sophisticated. She knows how to put on makeup. She's blonde. She really knows how to take care of herself. She only buys the best clothes. She's absolutely stunning. Yet I know that deep down she still sees herself as ugly. So that's one of those hang-ups one maybe never gets over it. Well, enough of Edith. I just had to bring her up because for a span life of 24 years, we had a very close relationships, and our lives were so similar that since that was the very first time I met her on that train, I just had to mention it. So anyway, we arrived in Marseille many years later, and we stayed for 3 weeks in a big home where we had to wait for the boat. And there were three men in charge of us. They were called madrich, that means leaders of the group. And those 3 weeks were very fun. I mean, I didn't have a chance yet to miss my mother or my home, and there were a lot of fun. We went to the port of Marseille, and it was all very light and pleasant. I have a very good memory of that. Anyway, the trip finally ended after 12 days, and we arrived in Haifa. And that was a day I will never forget. We arrived early afternoon, and going down the steps, it was a ramp, really, it wasn't steps, to the port of Haifa itself was some experience. The very, very first thing I remember were a lot of porters who were taking care of the tourists that were on the boat. And all of a sudden it hit us. Well, I'll talk for myself. I'm looking at those porters back and forth, running back and forth with luggages and this and that, and I'm saying, my God, they're Jewish. Those porters are Jewish. And then we went through the customs, and all these men in their uniforms, I'm saying, they're Jewish. Boy, this is incredible. They're all Jewish. And then we got out of the port itself, and there were many buses waiting for us, prepared to take us to that place that I mentioned before, the Ma'abara. And the bus drivers, I'm looking at them, and I'm saying, oh, I don't believe this. They're all Jewish. And it all hit me. It was, God, thousands of people have described at one time or another their arrival to Israel, whether it was as new olim, meaning new immigrants, or tourists, I know I've heard about it, I've read it 1,000 times, how people describe their very, very first impression on arriving in Israel. And it's been repeated 1,000,000 times how they looked at the policemen, bus drivers, taxi cabs, taxi drivers, garbage men, mailmen, and how all of them, it's the same reaction. You keep saying to yourself, my God, I'm in a Jewish state, they're all Jewish. I mean, that is really something. And I have to skip my description because I couldn't possibly express it, but I do remember reacting each time I saw another person in whatever field they were in. I'm saying, oh my God, they're Jewish. They're all Jewish. There's absolutely no anti-Semitism here. Nobody hates anybody. It's a free world. It's a free country. We're all Jewish. It's such a feeling. It's such a relief. And now, I was never a Zionist, but I did go through hell, World War II. I do remember hunger. I do remember the Nazis. I did know about anti-Semitism. And for the very, very first time, arriving in Haifa, those very first impressions, it hit me how actually Jewish I was, to appreciate where I was, and how where I was in this new state of Israel, there would not be any anti-Semitism. This struck me in the flesh. So it was really a great, great moment of, well, if I could speak better English, of course, I would be able to describe it better. Here goes another, the same hang-up I've had in the past. Eventually we got on the train, on the boat, and that was a nightmare. The boat, it took us 12 days to get to Haifa, to Israel. The weather, that was my very first experience on a boat. The weather was horrible, and I was very fortunate that I didn't get seasick, because half of the people on that boat were seasick. But the main point I want to bring out is that they put us in a, oh my God, what a nightmare. It was like the lowest part of the ship, of a ship. It was an Italian ship, I remember that now. And all the way the lowest. And there were girls and boys, the 200 of us. And those 12 days we never undressed, I don't think once. Because on the lower part of the ship, it was like one huge, I don't know if it's called a room, I don't know what the hell they called it, but it was a nightmare. And I remember we got each a blanket, just the one single blanket. Now this was April, it wasn't summer, it wasn't that hot yet. And we all slept on the floor, we didn't even get beds. Now, the Israel government, of course, paid for all the youth aliyah to come over, but they certainly couldn't afford we should go first class or second class. So the transportation, the trip was, it was unbelievable. It's a good thing we were all young and we didn't give a damn, none of us had that much comfort to begin with, so we didn't really mind it, but the smell after 2 days, it was that was the bad part. The trip, the weather was horrible. So many of the group got sick, and not once did I have any seasickness or did I have to vomit. But many of the others did, and no matter how much you clean up afterwards, the smell remains. And it was really ridiculous. It was so terrible. Of course, we would go on deck a lot. We were allowed to go on deck. And I remember there was my very first time that a young boy my age and I, if only I could remember his name, we got along very well, and we were very good friends. And he was maybe a year older than I. He was about 16. And this, I remember, was such a beautiful relationship between him and I. completely platonic, because he was only 16, he didn't know, but I remember that many times we were very cold at night, and so what many of us did, but I did it with him, which is interesting because we each received one blanket, and that's what we slept on. So what we would do is we would put down my blanket on the floor, and then his blanket would cover us, so we would both sleep with one another and keep warm that way. But at no time did we have any other relationship. It probably never even occurred to him. And I knew that where I was, I knew that I had already, but it was I saw that was so beautiful, of just sleeping together like that 10 days to keep warm without any sexual intercourse on his part. You know, it probably never even occurred to him. I mean, he was so young. And I remember thinking that, gee, I'm so young myself, I'm only 15, and I already have lived through a relationship with a man, and my stepfather of all people. Oh, and at all times I had him in my mind anyway, but the point was, it was very nice to be with this young guy, and the two of us very young and going into a new world, so unknown, not knowing what to expect. And it was very nice. I just have very good feelings about that period. But I will try to describe the next few days and then just jump to the future a little bit. We got on those buses, and boy, did they fill us in there. Only 26 people were allowed on the bus legitimately, but we were like 60 of us. It was like sardines. We were crushed against one another, and obviously they didn't have enough buses. I mean, Israel was very, very poor at that time, and they did have so many people emigrate every single day, especially in 49, a year after Israel became a state, that it was very difficult for the Israeli government to keep up with all that. And we drove on that bus for about an hour or so. I cannot recall exactly where we ended up, but it was a Mabara, and there they put the girls, there were about 30 of us girls in one like huge wooden house, kind of, whatever the hell it was, and the boys were in another, and we were divided this way. Now Edith, that same girl I mentioned before, we were among the 30 in one group, and we stayed there about 4 weeks, and I remember that every morning we all ate together, and it wasn't just the 200 of us. There were many more who had come from other states in Europe. They were from Hungary, Romania, Poland, France, every language you could hear. It was fascinating. It was like La Tour de Babel. And we all used to go to a huge dining room, and every single morning was the same thing. It was chalva, an orange, and whatever other food there was. The menu never changed. It was so monotonous. Today, right now, I have not been able to eat chalva orange for years after that experience, because oranges and chalva was absolutely the cheapest thing you could find in Israel, and I can't stand looking at it anymore. We still didn't know what they were going to do with us, where we were going to be placed. And eventually, after 3-4 weeks of being in that place, we were placed. They were, I would say, about 40 of us girls were placed in Jerusalem, and it was a home it was Orthodox, by the way, Mizrahi, which means Orthodox. It was a school of a kind. Now, half a day we went to school to finish our high school, I guess, and the other half a day we had to work. We each were assigned different jobs. either in the kitchen or cleaning or washing the laundry, whatever. So 40 of us were sent over there. Now, till today, I don't know what we accomplished much there, since, I don't see how we helped build the country. I originally thought they would put us in a kibbutz where we would grow, we would help with the land. And that's really what I thought they were going to end up doing with us. But anyway, 40 of us, they put there. And it's not like you could choose or say you want to go to kibbutz or you want to go to a city or you want this. Whatever they decided to do with us, that's what they did. Now, of the 40, again, Edith we were together, inevitably. We always seem to be sent to the same place. I don't know how they judge I don't know what made them send 40 here and 30 there. Till today, I still haven't figured it out. But the Israeli government, that's how they did things, So, of the 40 of us, we were not even the original ones starting off from Belgium. I would say there were about 12 of us, and Edith and I were two that had met on the train. Now, the rest of them came from other parts of Europe. So it was quite a melange.